Welcome to our 2022 Matrix Summit. For those I don't know, I'm Karen Rubian. I'm the director of the Center for Telehealth at the University of Virginia, and I am so thrilled that we are all here in person this year, finally, and also virtually. So for the first time, this meeting is actually hybrid. We have now more than 500 attendees representing 31 different states, and I say if anyone can do virtual, it's us. As you all know, COVID-19 has propelled the digital healthcare transformation. Collaborations between providers, healthcare systems, innovators, policymakers, and patients have enabled these transformations. We have demonstrated immense value, but where do we go from here? The next 2 days will be filled with opportunities to hear from thought leaders, to share a broad range of models of care redesign, and to network with colleagues, all of you here and virtually as well. So we would like to thank our federal partners at HRSA, including Deputy Regional Administrator Rob McKenna, and our colleagues from the Office for the Advancement of Telehealth, lovingly known as OAT, including Bill England, Michelle Carnes, Louise Knott, and Whitney Wiggins, who will also be participating virtually. We gratefully acknowledge our sponsors, VitalNet, our star sponsor, and our platinum sponsors, including CDW Healthcare, SciComm Technologies, ePlus, Triton, and TytoCare. Please try to visit them and our other very valued exhibitors and sponsors as well. We are all here today, and I'll embarrass her, due to the tireless efforts of our Matrix director, Dr. Kathy Wibberley, along with Anita Browning, our Matrix advisors, all of you who showed up, thank you so much, and Direct Travel, our conference logistical coordinators. I also want to express gratitude to our entire UVA team, led by Nikki Ryer-Facto, our new director. Stand up, Nikki. You're so tiny, nobody would necessarily see you otherwise. Meet Nikki while she's here, and you're all here. And to our whole UVA telehealth team, past and present. Could you guys all stand? I see some of you in the back, and our engineers are floating around. Thank you. It takes a village. We all know this, right? Okay, next, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shannon Dowler, Chief Medical Officer of North Carolina Medicaid, who will add her welcome this morning to, albeit virtually. And so, Jason, if you could tee up her video, that would be most appreciated. Thank you all.
Hi, I'm Shannon Dowler, Chief Medical Officer for North Carolina Medicaid. Welcome to North Carolina. Some of you are here in person and some of you are joining virtually. And if that's not one of the best things of the pandemic, I don't know what is. I can't even be here today, but yet here I am. Speaking of North Carolina, did you know Babe Ruth hit his first professional home run in North Carolina? Krispy Kreme, Pepsi, Vicks Vapor Rub, and Putt Putt were created in North Carolina. North Carolina has the UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Great Smoky Mountains, where I happen to live. And just down the mountain in Nashville, North Carolina, we've got the most breweries per capita of anywhere in the United States. And on that note, North Carolina used to be known as the Moonshine State. So when we're thinking about North Carolina, I'm going to tell you a story about telehealth in North Carolina. In December of 2019, then Deputy Secretary for North Carolina DHHS, Ben Money, and I began a work group called the Telehealth Modernization Work Group. And we set what we felt like were really lofty goals to advance the services available in telehealth in North Carolina Medicaid. Really, really big things like allowing it. After a series of educational and level-setting meetings, we agreed that a 3-year timeline was probably realistic for achieving our goals, knowing we'd have to secure legislative and federal authority, modify countless clinical policies, and find the money to pay for the services because our fiscal impact analysis was staggering. Fast forward 2 months. Yep, only 2 months later, I was convening the clinical team on a conference call, #oldschool, to brainstorm all the ways we could protect the health of our beneficiaries in a looming stay-at-home order. How could we keep them safely at home without creating care gaps or losing control of diseases, managing behavioral health needs, dealing with illness and crisis? There's nothing like a looming international crisis and unlimited authority to get your squeaky wheels greased. Money wasn't the issue, because we knew people weren't going to be accessing services in the traditional way. So we didn't have to worry as much about fiscal impact. Fraud and abuse is always a concern for a public payer. Everyone loves to audit the services we pay for with your tax dollars. But in the crisis, there was generosity of grace in this area, and we were in a rare, if not unprecedented way, unfettered. My analogy all along, I stole from our Chief of Clinical Operations, Sandy Terrell, that rapid modernization of Medicaid is like turning a tanker in a narrow canal. Tremendous programmatic change was not enough. We had to make sure that we weren't creating harm or risk to our beneficiaries and service provision, many in areas that didn't have an evidence base. We had to modify complex and archaic systems for payment and billing. We had to communicate regularly to the field to help them know what we were covering, but also how to bill for it and get paid for it. An unexpected challenge, we had to convince our beneficiaries to embrace these services. And we had to work with the other payers in the state to align our coverage with theirs so that we could simplify the burden on providers. In 6 weeks, the Medicaid team mobilized 387 temporary flexibilities while developing an evaluation strategy to learn from the temporary changes in telehealth as we considered making permanent policy. Over the past 2 years, we've used that data. We've tried to understand impacts on equity, utilization, and aligning with national standards to come up with our permanent changes. That first meeting in 2019 involved educators, folks like the Mid-Atlantic Telehealth Resource Center, and followed by that, a large statewide telehealth work group that include DHHS departments, but also people from around the state helping advise us on what would become permanent policy. It took a village to get us to today, and we're certain that not all our decisions around permanent policy coverage were perfect. We may be covering things we should not, and we might not be covering things we should. We depend on partnerships, expertise, and collaboration from leaders like you in the field to support North Carolina Medicaid, a payer for 2.7 million people in North Carolina, to help us get it right. We are so happy to welcome you and this brain trust to North Carolina.
Let's give a big round of applause for Kathy and the team, seriously. Kathy's going to give you an orientation to the logistics of the day, and welcome and thank you all for being here.
So I get the pleasure of doing all the housekeeping, but welcome to Hybrid Beta 1.0, and I'm only saying that because this is truly our very first time doing hybrid. I think everyone is exploring this whole hybrid thing for this year, and we'll see what happens. But this is my take on what a hybrid conference planning is like. And thank you to Erica Marks for finding some of these pictures. But hybrid is a familiarly unfamiliar beast, and this is a very true thing. I mean, a lot of this is just very familiar, but it's been like 3 years since we've done an in-person. Like walking up here, I was like, oh, like what do I do? Where's the clicker? I don't know how to do this. But you know, so much of this pandemic has driven us to a new place in everything that we do in all of life. And so I think, you know, before the beginning of great brilliance, there must be chaos. And that's what this, like the last year of conference planning has just felt like chaos completely. But I think, you know, before a brilliant person begins something great, they must look foolish to the crowd. So here I am. Hopefully things are not going to be completely foolish looking. But the good news is, and I think the reason we're all here virtually and in person is that we're in this together. And I think that, you know, we are here in the midst of care model redesign. We're also here in the middle of conference model redesign, and we are in this together. We're going to give each other grace, hopefully, because we all need it. But we're going to emerge in a better place, and I'm very confident of that. So, couple housekeeping things. Please silence your cell phones. Some of you have noticed probably if you pull up the app, you'll see the live streaming and you'll actually hear the live streaming. So it's really good to turn off your phones, not just because of the ringer, but because you might actually be hearing this on a several second delay. The network password has been a little bit different than what the hotel told us initially. So there are I think some cards on there, but it is all capital MATRC 2022, and you have to enter that twice. So the virtual event platform, you will actually need this today because we're trying to merge our virtual attendees with our in-person attendees. And the best way to capture question and answer and do polls is to have everyone on the same platform at the same time. So if you don't have this on your phone or on your browser or on your whatever device you have currently on you, please go to eventmobi.com/matrix2022 and go ahead and add that to your phone. You can add it to your home screen, just save it to your home screen, and you'll have it for the rest of the event. That will also be the place where you'll find the most up-to-date agenda and any room changes, announcements, things that go wrong, whatever, they will be pushed out to you that way. And so definitely recommend that you do that instead of using the paper program. All right. So when you have this app up, you can view the agenda. And there's two things that you need to know. So this is a good to know thing. On that main home screen, you'll see a widget called Sessions. If you click on Sessions there, it will show you every session that there is virtual or in person. But in that little menu bar, there's also a personalized thing, and that's based on your registration type. So if you registered as in person, it's going to just, if you click on Sessions from there, it'll just show you the things available for in-person people. And if you are virtual, it will show you certain things that are available to virtual that are not available to in-person people. So good to know, right? Everything that we have to date in terms of presentation slides, some of the speakers even provided other resources in addition to presentation slides. They have been loaded in here. If speakers have come and updated their presentation like 2 minutes before they present, I know it never happens, we will get that updated after we get back home. But it will get updated within the next probably 3 or 4 days. So you should have access to all the presentations. You should have access to additional resources. And some of the speakers even provided links to external like websites and things where you can find more resources. So awesome speakers, and this is great. So I'm going to say this, and I'm going to keep repeating it. It's a Matrix Summit tradition to dispense with the reading of bios. You have that all there. We really want that time to be given to our speakers. So if you go to your app, you can select the speaker, you can read their bio, and whatever other information you want from them. Tell me and I forget, teach me I remember, involve and I learn. So we're going to try something right now. You have your mobile app now? Okay. From the session, this is the welcome session. You should be able to find something called polls. And in the polls, there should be one poll in there, and it should ask you, would you rather? And we would love for you to say, see all the photos in my phone for everyone, or read all of my text messages. Go ahead and answer that poll question. And we'll give it a second. And then we'll have Jason pull up your responses. Not loading. People are having issues? Is this the Wi-Fi issue? Probably. All right. Like I said, hybrid 1.0. All right, see all the photos in my phone seems to be a winner at the moment. 48 responses. I don't know what you guys have been texting, but all right. So you guys kind of got the feel for how this works. So you find the polls. Right next to the polls, there's a Q&A box as well. I'm not going to make you do that. But basically, if you have questions, you can type them in. Make sure you hit the little arrow button to submit. And then once they're submitted, you'll see everyone's questions that have been asked, and you can actually upvote questions so that we don't have 20 questions that are asking the same thing. If you see a question that's similar to yours, just upvote it, and we should be good to go. All right, a couple things about what's coming up. So one is we do have posters. We have some fantastic posters this year. They are available, and there is a People's Choice Award for posters. So there's the winner will get a Fire TV Stick streaming device, as well as complimentary registration for next year. So stakes are good. But you do need to go to Vote People's Choice Poster Award to put your vote in. And granted, it could be a popularity contest, so whoever does the best marketing for their posters could win. And that's a hint to those who are in poster land. But when you do that, it'll take you to an external website called, I forgot what it's called, poll unit, and you'll see all the posters as graphics. You can click on them, and then there's a 5-star rating, and you just put in your star rating for the posters that you like best. We have a virtual exhibit hall and poster hall as well. And so it is open to anyone and everyone. It's set up like this. So if you hit the visit virtual exhibit and poster hall, you can actually go and see all the exhibit booths. You can see all the posters. You can make appointments with the poster presenters if you want to talk to them. Some really interesting things about the way that this is set up is that it takes you to the whole hall. If you hit the hall, you'll see a list of all the posters and all the exhibits you can filter. So if you just want to see the posters, you can filter by poster, or you can filter by sponsor. We also have a virtual networking lounge, and that has tables, and there's also something called fluid space. So some people say it's kind of creepy, some people say it's kind of cool. Basically, if you're in the fluid space with other people, you'll see the other people's icons moving around. And if you get close enough, you can connect by video and have a conversation with them. So, hey, very cool. There are some other things in here that like if you're in the physical exhibit hall, like they're not gonna have videos there, right? But if you actually wanna see more about a vendor, you can go to the virtual exhibit hall and kind of watch their promo videos and things like that. So that's kind of cool too. And you can explore it anytime you want. All right, we have a game going, and some people have already been playing. The game winner will get a Garmin watch, very nice, donated by one of our exhibitors. Play the game. I think there's some fun things in there, there's some trivia things in there, but there's also some encouragement to visit our sponsors. And I can't emphasize enough that we can't do this event on HRSA funding. we need to have our sponsors here, and so we would love for you to make their day by at least having some conversations, finding out what their products are, what their services are. It'll make it a win-win for all of us. We do have a job board on the mobile app, so we know that this is the time of people leaving, coming, going. So if you are in that transition, or if your company is hiring, please post a job opening up there, and that way people will know. We also have a special interest meet and greet for breakfast tomorrow. We sent out this, I think a few days ago, a little link to what special interest group meet and greet tables would you like? So if you say I want to meet up with other people who are really interested in cancer care and telehealth, put that in the poll, and we will set up a sign on a table in the breakfast area with special interest groups, so you can meet up with others with that interest. And last but not least, we usually have a telehealth technology showcase here every year. And Jordan Berg, who is in Alaska with our with our TRC, for national TRC, they're still forbidden to travel. So unfortunately, but he has offered to do a virtual technology showcase for us. And we're gonna queue up a little bit of a video just introducing the tech showcase for those of you who've not been to one.
My name is Jordan Berg. I have been working for TTAC for nearly 4 years as a telehealth technology assessment specialist. TTAC is housed in Anchorage, Alaska, as part of the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. We are a member of the National Consortium of Telehealth Resource Centers, and we are one of 2 national TRCs. We are focused on helping individuals and organizations select appropriate technologies for their telemedicine needs. We do this in 3 primary ways. First, we provide information about telehealth technology on our website, including innovation watches, videos, toolkits, and other resources. Second, we provide assistance directly, technical assistance to organizations and individuals through our technical assistance request form on either the TTAC website at telehealthtechnology.org, or you can also reach us through the National Consortium of Telehealth Resource Centers. And finally, we provide outreach via webinars, showcases, and virtual events, like the technology showcase. Technology showcase is something that's really kind of evolved in the last 2 years. It's really our way of taking the technology and putting it in people's hands. Technology Showcase is an opportunity for conference attendees or just people interested in telehealth technology to be able to review and assess similar types of medical peripherals, software, hardware in a vendor agnostic environment. Showcase is designed for participant interaction through live demonstrations, hands-on, and then questions and answers with TTAC staff. Our staff are generally on hand to answer questions about what the technology that we have present, as well as just general technology questions for organizations that might be new to telehealth or who are planning to expand and add an expansion to the telehealth program. Generally that they're fun. That's one of the things that we hear a lot is Showcase is a really fun way to see telehealth technology up close. We get a lot of participants that are really excited to see the variety of different technologies that we're able to bring and kind of house in one space. We also hear from people that they're glad to have a space to be able to ask the questions that they have, the questions that matter to their programs and providers in a really relaxed and vendor neutral environment. Absolutely. So we try to keep the virtual showcase as interactive as we possibly can. We do go over some of the trends that we're seeing in telemedicine, what things are really affecting the telehealth, telemedicine market space. But we also try to do as many virtual demonstrations as we can, demonstrating video, audio, medical peripherals, and then we try to build in as much time to take questions from the audience and participants as we possibly can. So I think we have it scheduled for an hour and a half. It's generally a pretty packed hour and a half. It's going to be a lot more engaging, and there's very little chance of death by PowerPoint. Right now, there's been a real growing interest in direct consumer peripherals. So we're bringing a few different direct consumer peripherals. Also, interest in remote patient monitoring programs, specifically in devices with built-in SIM technology, where the SIM connectivity is actually built right into the medical peripheral. And finally, we always like to bring something that's maybe a little bit on the edge of telemedicine, maybe looking a little bit more future-wise in terms of what's kind of considered telemedicine. And we want to talk a little bit and show you a little bit about wearable technology. So it's one of the things that we've been tracking in the last 3 to 4 months is these wearable technologies that are really currently aimed at consumers, but healthcare needs to begin to think about how we can collect this data and actually repurpose it in useful ways for use in telehealth and telemedicine. So that's kind of some of the things that we are looking at that are current and up and coming. So TTAC, whenever we talk about technology, we have a few kind of key things that we like to revisit, or we kind of like to reiterate. One is technology needs to have an end in view. It's not an end in itself. And what I mean by that is if you don't have a clearly defined purpose, goal for your technology, it generally is going to end up in a drawer. It's going to end up covered in dust. It's not going to do what you need it to do. The second kind of part of that is now more than ever, selecting and implementing a telehealth technology needs to be a real holistic effort for your organization. You need to have buy-in from across the entire organization, from your IT staff to your clinical staff to your administrative staff. It's important for those teams to understand what the technology needs to do and how they're going to support and measure success for the technology in your organization. Another point, and this goes back to the deluge of emails that we're getting from new technology vendors in our email inboxes, is we really need to look at the track record of vendors and organizations that we want to partner with. Are they really new to the market? Do they have a history of solving healthcare problems? We've seen a lot of technology vendors pivot into the healthcare space recently as an effect of COVID-19 and kind of the growth of the telehealth market. So really ask some hard questions from the vendors that you're engaging with or you're interested in engaging with. Who have they worked with? What have they done? What kind of solutions can they offer? And what's their experience of working with healthcare providers?
All right, so that's a little preview of the tech showcase, and what's in your print program is actually the two after the one. It says May 1, it should be May 12th. Kind of dropped off, I think, in the cutting of the graphic, so just make sure that it says May 12th, and it is correct in your app, like I said, the app is correct. So would love to have you, and this is only available to our conference attendees, so definitely take advantage of that. So before I transition to our opening keynote and to Rob, who will be our MC, I'm supposed to give a minute for the stream to switch over. Because hybrid 1.0. If I were entertaining, I'd do something, but I can't do that, so. You can just sit in awkward silence, or you can chat. All right, we are good. So we are getting ready to kick off with a plenary speaker, but before we do that, I want to introduce Rob McKenna, who is our Regional Operations Director from HRSA. And Rob has been a great friend for quite a number of years now, and is going to be kind of acting as our MC so that you don't have to keep hearing from me for the rest of the day.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I promise not to be another talking Fed head. This is just a second. So HRSA is very privileged to continue supporting the advancement of telehealth by administering programs like the telehealth resource centers. And those of you who have had any kind of engagement with Kathy and the rest of the Mid-Atlantic Telehealth Resource Center team surely know that they truly are a superstar among the telehealth resource centers. I think I embarrass Kathy every time we're together because I make a point of making sure everybody knows that we're really fortunate for this region center. I am certain that this region's telehealth status would not at all look the same were it not for the efforts of Karen and Kathy and Anita and their team. Kathy commented that this conference is something they cannot do with only HRSA funding. There are a lot of things that they do and figure out how to do without HRSA funding. And it's made telehealth look so different than it would had it not been for them. So I would like to invite all of us to give them a loud verbal thank you at the count of 3. This will also help get our energy up in the morning too, right? And if you're virtual, you can just type in a thank you and any other thank you notes you might want to offer. So I'm going to count to 3 and ask all of us to as loud as you can, just say thank you. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. One more time. That did not sound good. 1, 2, 3. Much better. Thank you, really, Telehealth Resource Center, Mid-Atlantic. How many of you, by show of hands, are attending a conference or a summit for the first time since the pandemic started? A lot of you. Me too. It was quite something to realize that your clothes don't fit quite the same way. But I'm sure you will feel the same. I am really glad to be here. The Mid-Atlantic Telehealth Resource Center Summit is really I tell Kathy this all the time too. Because of my profession, prior to HRSA, I've been to hundreds of these kinds of events. I used to say this is one of the top 5. I now say to everybody, this is the best conference-like event that I routinely go to that have ever experienced. There is something here for everybody, no matter where you are in telehealth. The design is great, the networking is great, everything is just stellar, including the speakers. They bring you the best of the best. Amy Blankson, CEO of Fearless Positivity, is no exception, the best of the best. So without further ado, I give you Amy Blankson.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Matrix. I'm so happy to be here with you today in person. What a joy it is to see real, actual human beings with faces. It is lovely. I had the opportunity this morning to sit at breakfast with a table from North Carolina. And can I see who all is here from North Carolina? Yeah, there's a great crew. All right, thank you. Yeah, it was lovely to get to connect and to hear a little bit more specifically from John about the work that you've been doing in the space of telehealth. My husband is actually a telehealth provider himself. He is an adolescent medicine doctor. We are in Dallas, so I didn't quite know where to sit this morning for breakfast because we're usually considered to be our own country over there. So I just picked a random table. But no, I had the opportunity to sit with my husband through many of his virtual staff meetings because we're both working remotely and side by side in the kitchen together. And so I heard firsthand the challenges that he faced converting his clinic from fully in-person to fully virtual in about a week. And I saw all of the hesitations and the challenges that they were facing, the administrative, operational pieces, the no-shows that happened, the late nights, the long screen time hours that many of you are spending to provide exceptional care to the people who need it so desperately in your communities. So first off this morning, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for the hours you put in, the energy, for leaning into optimism, as Kathy said, with this kind of beta hybrid 1.0 we're working on. I can't think of a group that better exhibits fearless positivity than this group. But that being said, one of the things that I think could be definitely said of this group is that you probably are tired too. It's so lovely to be connecting with one another because there's been such a sprint to get to where we are here today. So as we're looking forward to the future, at redesigning care models and expanding what you've been working on and put so much effort into here today, there's definitely an element of needing to lean a bit more into the unknown. As we look forward, there's still so much we don't know, whether it's funding, whether it is hiring processes, whether it's operations and supply chains. But I think if we take a moment to pause and look backwards at where we've come on that bridge, we should be very proud. We should be exceptionally proud of ourselves for what we've accomplished, how many people we've helped, and where we are here today, and specifically at the bleeding edge of what's happening with technology and with the redesign of care. So this time has been called the Great Reset. And I always like to pause and think, what are we resetting? What are we resetting to? What does this look like? And a lot of times I speak to organizations, we've been talking about the future of work, but the question really is, when we are redesigning these protocols and policies and where we want to go, is this the future that we really want to see, or are there things that we still want to tweak? Are there ways that we need to connect better, that we can definitely support one another in different ways to really begin to adapt to so much of what we're experiencing? A lot of times what I hear from audiences is this one phrase, I'll be happy when ... Now you might hear this from some of your patients, you might hear it from some of your staff, you might say it yourself. Some of what I'm going to say here today might resonate with you. It might validate where you are already at, and it might also give you some tools and language to help those individuals who weren't able to be here with us today. So when we're saying I'll be happy when, I'm coming out of a background and a bias from the field of positive psychology. And what we talk about in the field of positive psychology is that when we use this phrase, what happens is that we continue to push happiness over the cognitive horizon, which means that every time we get closer to thinking, okay, I'll be happy when the pandemic is over. I'll be happy when things get back to normal. I'll be happy when it's summertime. I'll be happy when I finally get to go on vacation. Each time what we move towards that goalpost of success and happiness, what happens is that our brain actually just shifts out just a little bit more to the next goalpost and the next goalpost and the next goalpost. So our brains never actually get to that feeling of success that we were so deeply desiring, that feeling of fulfillment and long-term success. And what we're learning from the field of positive psychology is that if we can reverse that formula, if we can begin to look at how we find that sense of happiness in the present, it will help us to be more successful in the long run. And today I want to share with you some of the strategies that we can use specifically in the telehealth field to begin to share this not only with your staff, but also with your patients that you're dealing with as well. So we know that a positive mindset is the single greatest competitive advantage in the modern economy. It has been responsible for so much of the success points that you may not even be aware of. And so I wanted to share some of them with you. Individuals who have a positive mindset about the future have 37% higher sales. They have 6 times the levels of creativity. That actually got updated in the last month when a new study came out showing that the amount of creativity from positivity has actually doubled. They're 31% more productive. They're 40% more likely to receive a promotion. They have 23 less fatigue symptoms, which is amazing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. They're 10 times more engaged at work, 39% more likely to live to the age of 94, and they have 50% lower chance of heart disease. Wow, right? I think when I look at this list, and I only picked out a few of my favorite statistics here, what I think to myself is, why aren't we always positive? I mean, if this is really true, I want all of those things. But there's sometimes that we're held back from being our most optimistic selves. And I think that it's oftentimes because when we hit a roadblock, we think, you know what? I've been there, I tried it, it didn't work, this person wasn't gonna go forward with it, it's just, I give up, right? We give up sometimes. Or alternatively, we hold ourselves back from full optimism because you think, well, what if people think that I'm too optimistic? Like I'm a Pollyanna-ish character. They don't take me seriously enough. And so I don't want to seem too optimistic about things. I'll hold it in and rein it in a little bit. Or maybe they think, oh, you're not being cautious enough. You need to really think through the risks more. You need to like hold off because you just seem like you're just happy-go-lucky and you haven't really thought through this. Bet you've heard that one before. Or maybe you are afraid of being perceived as being a little bit obnoxious. You don't want to be seen as that Tigger. You don't want to be Eeyore as well. You want to be somewhere in the middle. You want to be kind of average, right? Or lastly, you may just not be feeling it, which is okay too. And sometimes we see that happen. But what I think about optimism, what we're not talking about here is living with a sense of kind of toxic positivity we hear so much about. When I think of toxic positivity, I think of individuals who are throwing happiness in other people's faces without a lot of empathy, right? Like, oh, just be happy. Just, brush it aside. Just, I'm not going to think about that. I'd rather stick my head in the sand and not pay attention to what's going on in Ukraine or what's going on in the world right now or what's happening with the economy or politics. I'm just going to ignore it all, right? But that's not a solution either. That's just hiding. But what we really want to do is lean into rational optimism, which I define as the belief that your behavior matters, which actually starts with realism, not with rose-colored glasses. It's looking at what's going on in the world, giving a slight priority to the positive, knowing that that attitude is what's going to move us forward to where we need to get to. So the ancient Greeks often talked about this idea that this was actually their definition, that optimism is the belief that your behavior matters. I love that definition. I hear my husband now use that with several of his patients as well, who find themselves getting stuck at times. And the reason why this is so powerful is because when we are on this kind of incline plane, what's so interesting to me is that when you have the support of somebody else on the other end of that seesaw, that you can suddenly reach higher heights than ever before. But optimism is the fulcrum point. When you move where the fulcrum point is on that lever, it changes how high you can go, both as an individual and as a team. So today we're going to talk about 3 different strategies for fearless positivity, how you can bring it into your own life, how you can bring it into your practice, how you can bring it into your patients' lives. And I'm going to share with you these 3 quick strategies that I think can be something that you'll walk away from here with today with some actionable ideas of what you can do to put this into practice. I know there's some scratch paper beside you. You may want to grab some because I'm going to have a couple of activities that you might want to do with you. Those of you who are virtual, if you want to do them on some scratch paper, maybe go get some now as well. So the first strategy we're going to talk about is rethinking stress. Rethinking stress. We all go through lots of stress, and one of the most helpful ways I find to process stress is to actually think about stressful situations we've been through in the past, what we did well to handle them, and what we can learn from those moments in our lives. So for me, one of the most stressful times in my life was right after my husband had gotten out of medical school, and he had done an ROTC scholarship. So he was doing his first duty station as a resident in the military. And when they assign you in the military to a particular duty station, they actually give you a choice about where you want to go. They let you rank order the top 20 places that you might want to move to. And as a new military spouse, I was thinking, Italy, Japan, Hawaii, Germany. I am up for adventure. Send me anywhere. I am ready to travel, right? Nowhere on the top 20 list of my list was Biloxi, Mississippi, which was where, of course, they moved us to. And so when we were sent to Biloxi, I remember my mom specifically saying, she's the ultimate optimist, and she said, Amy, you just gotta bloom where you're planted. And so I really took that to heart. I remember that, there he is getting ready, and we had packed up our little yellow truck of all of our worldly belongings, bought our very first home in Biloxi, which turns out to be incredibly affordable out in the rural areas, so it was wonderful. And we even got a cute little puppy. And we were actually loving Biloxi. I was there for about 3 months. We really felt like we'd settled in. We'd found our groove. We had made friends with neighbors and just really enjoyed the lifestyle in Biloxi, when all of a sudden, Hurricane Katrina hit. And in the span of just 3 days, we lost our puppy, we lost our house, we lost our community. We were separated for the next 18 months. I wound up going back to school. He was sent all over with the military. Chaos ensued. And when I think back to that time, wow, stress, right? That was overwhelming. We went through a very stressful time. But when I think about that particular time, I like to think of the photography of Chino Otsuka, who's a Photoshop artist who takes pictures of herself as a child, and then she Photoshops in pictures of herself as an adult. So each one of those photos is her older and younger self. And she uses the theme of what I wish I knew back then. And what I wish I had known back then on the Gulf Coast of Biloxi was really this work of Sonia Lyubomirsky from Positive Psychology, who talks about how if you tell me how much money you make, where you live, and how many pets you have, I can accurately predict your happiness levels by exactly 10%. Because turns out that the other 90% of your happiness is actually due to your genes and your perception of the world. So only 10% environment, which really was shocking to me, right? We sometimes think that the stress and the challenges we're going through in our environment are so permanent and pervasive that there's no way we can overcome them because those things are happening to us. But what I learned from Sonia Lyubomirsky was truly that we have this human agency to change the narrative of how we see ourselves in the world and in space and time. And we'll talk a little bit about how we can shape that narrative as we go along. But when I'm thinking about this, I want to know, how do you handle stress? When you're going through something really stressful in your own life, does it feel for you like it is a threat, like there's things coming at you and it just makes you tense up? Or does it maybe feel like a challenge, like something you want to get over? Well, the truth is we kind of fluctuate between these things, right? Sometimes it feels like a giant threat to us, and sometimes it feels like a possible challenge. So since many of you are in the medical field, I know you know some of this research already, but just to cover it for those of you who might be vendors or administrators as well, what we talk about in this field is that there are different regions of the brain where we can process stress. So when we're processing stress as a threat, we actually use our amygdala, which is our big emotional center. It creates giant emotional reactions. When we're using our prefrontal cortex, we tend to be more logic-centered, right? And so when you are perceiving stress as a challenge in your life, you actually use a different region of your brain. Well, it turns out that the research is coming out of Yale University with Peter Salovey, current president of Yale University, was that when you are facing a stressful situation, you can actually change the region of your brain you're using actively. And the way that you do that is by, in that moment, challenging yourself to do something very, very tiny. So let's do a silly example of how this works. For me, one of the stressors I experienced as a mother of some young children was walking out into the kitchen in the dark to flip on the lights when all of a sudden you step on a Lego piece. Now, if you don't have children, you don't know that those little Lego pieces are actually weapons of torture. They are some of the most painful things you can experience. And when you step on it, it feels like a knife is going through your foot and someone is coming to attack you. So that moment, I remember I had just read this study and I decided to challenge myself to try exactly what I was talking about. I challenged myself to try to laugh in the midst of the circumstance, or to smile for just a second at the fact that I was doing this, or to think of something I was grateful for, like, oh, I found that Lego piece the kids were looking for. Doesn't matter what it was or how cheesy it was or how I was even making fun of myself in the moment. What mattered is that I challenged myself to do something in that moment. And when I did so, it can actually lower your pain threshold for that by up to 23%. It lowers that physical sensation of the stress, and it helps you to get through the pain just a little bit faster. So knowing that we have this locus of control to be able to flicker between regions of our brain that we're using to process stress means that we have some agency about what we do in our circumstances. So that's a silly example, but let's talk through a slightly more, a very much more important scenario, and that is who we're choosing to be moving out of the pandemic. We're thinking about care redesign in our lives, but truly, aren't we also thinking about our own personal care redesign? How do we live in this space? And when the pandemic hit, many of us were in the fear zone. I certainly was. I was out of the country. I was trying to figure out what was going to happen with getting back in the country, and what was going to happen with the kids' school, and what was going to happen with our finances and our jobs. And so I did panic buy toilet paper just one time, I promise. But I do remember that there's these moments where we didn't know what was going to happen, so we're just trying to amass everything and self-protect. I was in fear zone. But as the pandemic went on, I eventually began to move more into the learning zone, and even some days into the growth zone of being able to turn what I learned into helping others and to be able to look outwards. But what we've learned through this process is that on any given day, we slide up and down that continuum, and it can change throughout the day. You don't get to arrive at being in the growth zone and stay there for the rest of our lives. It's a constant effort. But what makes a difference for me has been social support. We'll talk a little bit more about social support here at the end today. But as we're thinking about this idea of rethinking stress and flickering between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, I want to challenge you today to challenge yourselves to rethink your stress by trying to move yourself further along on this continuum. What would that look like for you to move into the growth zone? Maybe today you might have some places in your life that are full of stress and you find yourself in the fear zone. Maybe you can start leaning into the learning zone, or maybe leaning into the growth zone if you have the resources to move there. These are great frameworks to begin to help you to put this into practice. So that's rethinking stress. Now, the next strategy for bringing fearless positivity into your personal and professional life is optimizing your mindset. So optimizing your mindset is a strategy. It's a skill set. We often think of happiness as an emotion. Turns out it's a work ethic. It's something you practice and work towards. So when you are thinking about your work here at Matrix, I want you to think about, do you see your work as a job, as a career, or as a calling? So a job being a paycheck, it's a means to an end. A career being, this is a stepping stone to the next job that I really want. Or calling being something that you are very deeply personally connected to. This research comes out of Yale School of Management with Amy Blankson, who studied this with a group of janitors at the Yale New Haven Hospital. And she went to the group of about 200 janitors in the hospital, and she asked them the same question. Do you see your work as a job, as a career, or as a calling? And of course, being a janitor is incredibly difficult work, both physically and emotionally. And so she wasn't surprised that out of the 200 janitors, only one person responded that they saw their work as a calling. So she was fascinated. She went to this individual and she's like, can I ask you a few questions? I want to understand a little bit more about your thinking. And he said, sure, but I'm going to be working, so you can come to my patient's room and I'll talk while I'm cleaning. She said, okay, great. So came to the room, and the entire time that she's chatting with him about why he has this optimistic view and why he's, really saw his work as a calling, he's cleaning the room. He's fixing the bed sheets. He's fixing the blinds. He's straightening pictures on the wall. And finally, Amy turned to him and she said, can I just ask you, I understand cleaning the room, keeping it healthy, but why do you straighten the pictures on the wall of a patient who's been in a coma for 6 months? And he said, oh, Well, because when the patient wakes up, I want it to be to a healthier, happier room. And for her, that encapsulated everything. That he had that kind of work ethic about the way that he saw his role on the team. And you know what? It turns out that everybody on that floor looked to that individual as a leader of culture for the team. That janitor turned out to be the central point of creating positive culture in the hospital, in that particular wing. And they knew that it was a calling for him. Sometimes I think we hide behind what we think is an opaque veil, thinking, oh, nobody will know that I'm just doing this for a paycheck. I can just go about my work and do my thing. But the truth is that it's transparent. Everybody around us knows whether we see our work as a job, as a career, as a calling, and we know it. And it turns out when you begin to think of your work as a calling, it changes the way that you approach your own work. And so what I want you to do today is to think about, if you don't yet see your work as a calling, what are some ways that you could connect to begin to build up your charisma as a leader, to begin to exude a little bit more connection to the work that you're doing, whether or not it is a stepping stone or a paycheck? How can you connect deeper to what you're doing as a calling? What we learned in the field of positive psychology as well is that when we are looking at our goal setting for the future, oftentimes we trend towards being average, honestly. We are trying to do what everybody else is doing in the field. And when we're looking at trend lines in terms of what's happening around us, typically this is a trend line for individuals' happiness levels. So what happens is that when you begin to look at some of the positive outliers, usually we scrub them out of our data because they throw off the data set, right? But here we begin to look at the positive outliers and focus in on them. Think, well, within our workspace, who are those positive outliers? What are they doing? Why are they able to sustain happiness at a higher level? And how do we get there? And what happens is that when you aspire to be average, you remain average. But when you aspire to be great, your trend line starts to go up and everybody else trends towards you. That's where we want to get to here. So we're leveraging the science of potential by leaning into positive outliers. So this image is one of my favorite images. Those of you who live in snowy climates are all too familiar with what happens with inclement weather. You can immediately see all the stresses and the hassles and the complaints that come when you begin to have weather that impacts your patient schedules, it impacts kids getting to school, it impacts your commute times, it impacts your health, maybe your electricity. All sorts of problems come with the winter storm, right? But what's actually happening here is that this is a picture of the human brain. So when you look at this image, I want you to imagine that every single snowflake you see on the screen is a bit of information flying at you. In fact, 40 million bits of information every single second. But the human brain is a single processor, which means that when we're trying to search this environment for information, that your brain can actually only focus on 40 bits of information at any given time. So for those individuals I talk to all the time who say, Amy, I'm not an optimist, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. I think, yes, you are a realist with 40 bits of information. But it turns out that there are 10 million plus other bits of information that are also equally true that maybe you just didn't incorporate into your assessment. So when we're looking at this, if your brain gets stuck on all the stresses and the hassles and the complaints, well, guess what? We have no brain power left to process the meaningful things, to see the new opportunities, to see the different ways of doing things. That's where telehealth is really excelling here, is that you've been able to see the snowflakes that no one else saw. You've been able to put them together in some new ways to be able to move the entire field forward. But you have some people who are still stuck looking at all the stresses and the hassles and complaints, right? They don't necessarily get it yet. They're a little bit scared or they're stuck in that fear zone. So our role is to bring them into learning zone and maybe even into growth zone, right? And the way that we're going to do that is by teaching some positive habits. These are micro habits that take less than 2 minutes a day, with the exception of one of these. I'll let you guess which one. And what I want you to do in this list is we're going to talk through something called the JGAME, which is my cheesy acronym for remembering the 6 most effective habits for creating positive change in your life. So J for journaling, G for gratitude, A for acts of kindness, M for meditation, E for exercise, and S for screen limits. And I'm going to walk through how you do these in 2 minutes a day. And I want you to be thinking of one of these that you're not currently doing, that you might want to try as a personal experiment to just see if it makes a difference for the next 21 days in your life. And after I walk through these briefly, I want to actually ask you which of these that you might want to commit to for the next 21 days. You're sitting here already for an hour with me this morning. So if you've already sat here, you might as well get something out of it. You might think, okay, I know all of this. I've been there. I've done that. But maybe you haven't actually put it into practice. So I want to challenge you to try it. So let's walk through and talk about how each of these works. So J for journaling. Now, we've all heard about journaling before, but for this exercise, what I want you to do, and you can do it now with me if you want to. I'm going to move through fairly quickly so we can get through the content, but feel free to scribble on some paper in front of you if you want to try it out right here in session. So J for journaling is taking 2 minutes to write down some meaningful moment that's happened in the last 24 hours of your life. So I once said this, and somebody said, "You mean this is the last 24 hours of my life?" I thought, no, no, something that's happened in the last day here that's meaningful to you. It doesn't have to be happy, just something that happened that really caught your attention and had some personal meaning. So what were you doing? Who were you with? Why was this so meaningful to you? It just takes a couple of bullet points, maybe a paragraph. It's a very quick little exercise. But the reason why journaling is so important is because when you pause to think about that moment that was so meaningful to you, what happens is that your brain puts a bookmark in that moment. It would have passed by, you would have thought about it or maybe not thought about it again, but now you've bookmarked it. And when you write down physically, you handwrite about it, it turns out that your brain can't tell the difference between visually experiencing that moment and actually experiencing it. So in that moment, you're reliving the most meaningful moment the last 24 hours of your life, which has now doubled the meaning. You've gone through it once, now you're going through it twice. And you can go through it again if you go back to read over these. If you do this every day for 21 days, what happens is that over the course of 21 days is that your brain begins to connect the dots of meaning. And suddenly you see this trajectory of purpose that you would have missed altogether. So if you're one of those individuals who's beginning to contemplate the meaning of life, what is your purpose? What is your calling in life? This is a great exercise to go to practice that. Turns out that for individuals who journal, we actually did this with a group of individuals at the National MS Society who were experiencing chronic pain. We did the same exercise. We asked them to journal for just 21 days. At the 6-week mark, we measured their happiness levels pre and post, and they found that those individuals reported being able to lower their pain medication by up to 50%. 6 months later, there was still a 30% lower relapse rate, which is insane, right? These sound like tips or tricks, but these are actually the building blocks of how the brain begins to process experience and begins to biologically and psychologically connect the dots between those experiences. So that's journaling. Second habit, gratitude. Now for this exercise, it would be just taking 2 minutes to write down 3 things that you're grateful for. And what I want to say is you have to be very specific on this one, because whatever you write down on day 1, you are not allowed to reuse on day 2. So if you are writing down, I'm thankful for my health and my dog and my family, well, you just use some big bucket categories for the future. So got to be really specific so that you're not having to work too hard on day 21. So when I've done this, we did this at American Express. We forgot to tell them about the specificity. At the end of the experiment, there was 0 effect. Turns out that the importance of this exercise is all about specificity. So what's happening here is that when you're practicing gratitudes, your brain is actually scanning your environment for things it's going to say it's grateful for. So imagine the snowflakes. What you're doing is looking for some new snowflakes that you wouldn't have noticed before. And again, you're bookmarking them. So when you're looking for those snowflakes, your brain is having to go through the scanning process. It's making new neural connections. In the same way that, if you took the same commute to work every day, you would see the same stores, you would see the same roads, right? But now we're going to ask you to take a detour, to take a different road to work. What do you notice? Turns out you see a lot of new things. You might make some new connections. And that is where both the creativity piece comes in, as well as the opportunity to take advantage of new opportunities in your space. So rerouting your mental neural pathways using gratitudes. It's a very simple exercise. The third habit is acts of kindness. Now, this is one of my favorite ones. So this one, what you have to do is write a list from 1 to 21 Day one is the hardest because I'm going to make you come up with 21 people in your life that you are connected to. For this particular exercise, it needs to be somebody who is alive in your life. What I want you to do is to write down everyone you can think of, friends, family, neighbors. It could be teachers in your kids' lives. It could be coworkers. It could be neighbors, or whoever it might be. 1 to 21. And I want you then to go to person number 1 on the list on day 1. And your job is just to send them a quick text message to simply say, thank you for being in my life. I was thinking about you. How's it going? Doesn't have to be anything massive. It'll probably take you more time to find their text message numbers than it is to actually write the message. But what happens in this is that as you're taking that moment to send a kind, thoughtful message to somebody in your social support network, that individual, of course, they feel better. And then all of a sudden you feel better because you're the kind of person who does this stuff. You're like, yeah, I did that. And sometimes you'll hear back from that individual, which makes you feel good as well. And on top of that, sometimes that individual will feel so good that they'll send a message on to somebody else. My record for creating a ripple effect so far has been about 5,000 people who got messages in 5 minutes. That is phenomenal. What happened is I talked to a group of young people. They were a volleyball team. They wound up sending out messages to other people who sent out messages to other people. They got messages back. It was insane. And it was so fun to watch the process. And that exercise, we actually had cell phone ringers on. And so you could hear this ding, 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 ding. It was really cool. But that's the beginning of what we see that happens with that pay it forward effect. If you've ever been to Starbucks and somebody pays for your car, it kind of takes you aback for a moment, right? Like, wow, that's really cool. They reached out. And then the car behind them and the car behind them, the record for Starbucks pay it forward is 287 cars. Amazing. I would hate to be car 288. I don't know who they were or what was happening in their day. But I do know that kind of paying it forward is the kind of thing that changes the world. So that's acts of kindness, creating a positive feedback loop. M for meditation, taking 2 minutes to simply watch your breath go in and out. For those of you who joined the stretching, the chair stretching this morning, that was a pretty cool experience for getting to hear and just take that moment before the day ever begins to simply slow down and watch your breath go in and out. And what's happening here is that we are going from what I call the tyranny of the urgent that strikes in the morning. That is your phone calls, text messages, the news alerts, the stock alerts, the social media alerts, the game alerts, whatever is going on in your life, all the emails flooding in. That's the tyranny of the urgent. So before that ever hits, what I like to do is just take 2 minutes before I ever put my fingers onto my keyboard to just watch my breath go in and out. We're going from this culturally ADHD world of multitasking to single tasking for just 2 minutes so that we can go back to multitasking, which we all know we're going to do, but we're going to do so with a single-minded purpose. The days that I stop to meditate before I start my work are fundamentally different from the other days. I'm more on point. I'm more focused. I remember really important things like my mother's birthday all of a sudden. I'm like, phew, all right, got that one, right? So those things kind of bubble up to the surface. And imagine when we're constantly in triage mode, we're in emergency room mode of trying to respond to things, we can't be that focused. We can't be that in tune. So to do something nice for yourself, just giving yourself that 2 minutes to be your best self, your most charismatic self, is a great way to start the day. Turns out that individuals who meditate in the morning are also 10% more accurate on basic math tests like addition and subtraction problems. So if you need extra accuracy on your teams, this is a great thing to practice. And the best thing of all with meditation is that if you begin to pick up a practice of meditation, other people around you will pick up the benefits even if they don't know that you're meditating. Wait a minute, so you've never told anybody that you're meditating and they pick up the benefits? Yes. Turns out that in the same way that you have that mirror neuron effect of, one person yawns and the next person yawns, the same thing happens with meditation. Also happens with smiles as well. Your mirror neurons begin to copy those in your emotional environment around you, and you pick up benefits. Now, the reason I mention this is because a lot of people, particularly in the health space, have told me, I have this one toxic coworker. They're so negative. They're bringing everything down. I've even had people say, Amy, can I just hit them over a head with a happiness book? think, no, violence is not the answer, right? Hitting them overhead is not the solution. But what is a solution is that you can take care of you, hopefully inspire them. You can also lead with empathy and ask them if everything's okay and bring them alongside you with learning about positive psychology. Those are great strategies. But meditation is such a powerful way that my introverts in particular really like to be able to use, because you don't have to be confrontational, but you can still have an effect. Next to last is exercise. Yes, this is the only habit that takes longer than 2 minutes. Guys, I'm so sorry. I wish I had a magic wand. But since you are medical providers, you get it. You know it's important. I don't have to hit this one over the head. But I do think that I include exercise into the JGAMEs because we know that exercise is a bit of a starter drug. It creates those endorphins that get you going for the day, that when you exercise at 9 in the morning, you have that cognitive win early on in the day that makes you feel more efficacious later in the day. Not only that, but individuals who exercise tend to create constellations of positive habits, meaning that one positive habit of exercise begins to cascade into other parts of your life. So suddenly you feel like, oh, I think I'm gonna meditate. I'm gonna start journaling. I'm gonna say my gratitudes. And so you wanna do it all. So I love exercise for that. If you haven't been doing it, definitely worth a try. The last one, screen limits. I had to include this one here especially because we're talking about telehealth, and because my focus as a speaker really is on the intersection of happiness and technology. It's so important for us to step back and to begin to think about wellness in a bit more of a holistic way. In particular, we know that individuals are so burned out. 89% of individuals are burned out from screen time. We know that 40% of people say that they're less productive due to this emotional overload from digital overwhelm, and that 90% say that stress has actually impacted their home life. So mental health crisis is not new to you. We all know that this is a big issue. But what I do want to call out here today is that I think it's time that we actually start to redefine wellness to include the way that digital affects so many different areas of our lives. We're so used to talking about mental health or physical health as the top two, but there are many different types of wellness. And I think it's worth talking about how technology impacts all these different areas. So this is actually what I call the digital flourishing model. It's something that I've been working with a team of researchers on for the past 2 years, and beginning to create content and learning modules around how you can help teams to upskill, to understand how does your technology impact your connections at work? How does your environment and your interaction with distractions impact your work? And I know as for a fact with my husband and his telehealth, we're actually relocating his telehealth office from our bedroom now into our master closet, because there is that inevitable distraction in the background. You're trying to stay focused and there's so many things going on, right? And that makes him stressed out, which then passes along to the patients, which then passes along to the families. And so there's a massive ripple effect here that if we're not addressing how the environment is impacted and how those relationships and how our productivity and our mental health is tying in, then we're missing the boat on something big. I think of digital wellness now. We used to think of it as a luxury, like, ooh, digital boundaries, wouldn't that be nice? Now it's absolutely essential. You have to be able to shut off, knowing that we're in a global time zone, knowing that the world is so connected that people are texting or messaging on different platforms. You have so many different channels coming at you that if you don't find those spaces to disconnect, to create those boundaries, to give yourself a break, you will crash and burn. So let's rethink this together. So in terms of screen limits, what I recommend is that you take 2 minutes to just go look at your screen time settings. Number one, recognize what is your screen time. It might be different between your laptop and your phone, so you can pick which one you want to do. Set a baseline for yourself, and then set a goal of where you want to get to. And your goal for this habit for 21 days is to check in on that screen time and just see if you're moving towards where you want to get to. And maybe it requires taking something off your phone just for 21 days to help you achieve your goals. For me, it was SimCity. I admit, I justified it because I thought I was being productive and learning about the world. No, Amy. No, it was just a distractor. For my husband, it's Twitter, and we have all sorts of raging debates about how much time is worth it to spend on Twitter. So he would justify it as, oh, I've got to keep up with the latest and greatest in medical news. But turns out that when he was on Twitter, he was falling into the rabbit hole of a lot of negative providers who were making him feel worse and worse and more anxious about what's going on in the pandemic, and that it wasn't actually helping him. So there's kind of a sweet spot in that return on investment for time spent online and then time where it's just wasted or actually detrimental. So that being said, I previewed this for you. I want to find out for you which of these 6 habits might you want to try for the next 21 days. And I know this room is full of overachievers, so there's some of you out there who are like, if this is going to help me, I'm going to do them all. I love that. Turns out the research says that if you pick up one, you're more likely to stick with it. So for this exercise, you get 1 vote of 1 habit you're going to start with, and then you can always add on more later. So how many of you out there, raise your hand for me, are thinking about picking up journaling? Awesome. All right, how about gratitudes? Oh, I love that. Acts of kindness, meditation, exercise, and screen limits. All right, brave soul, that's awesome. All right, well, thank you so much for doing that. Number 1, for making that commitment to yourself. We know that individuals who write down, here's the results from online. Oop, let me go back because I really wanted to see that. Awesome, for our online participants, we had about 11% journaling, 23% gratitude, 14% acts of kindness. So it's pretty evenly split, but exercise, way to go. That's awesome. Lots of people who are going to focus on exercise. So what I love committing here is because not only are you taking the first step, we know that when you write down your commitments and you make that acknowledgement, this is something I'm going to do, that you're already on your way. You're actually 40% more likely to achieve your goal, so you're already well on your way. You've also now just publicly committed in front of your colleagues, so now you have to do it, right? But I also wanted to give you the opportunity and space that maybe you want to use each other as a support, as a resource. If you saw someone else raise their hand for the same habit you're working on, maybe catch each other after the session and say, hey, how are you going to build it in? What are you going to do? Maybe we could be accountability buddies. Maybe we could send each other a text reminder in a week to say, hey, how's it going? So make it really actionable, practical, so that you'll actually do it, because this is the building blocks, right? These things make a huge difference for you and for your practice. Lastly, the 3rd habit, the 3rd practice that I wanted to share with you for building fearless positivity into your life is activating your social support network, which sounds obvious. We all know social support is important, but what you may not know is that social support is as predictive of how long you'll live as obesity, high blood pressure, and smoking combined. That's how important social support is. And we know that in the midst of a mental health crisis, that social support is even more important than ever before. It's actually the single greatest predictor of long-term success and happiness. So when we're thinking about getting social support, particularly as a provider, it can be difficult to stop and actually give yourself that important care time. You're so busy taking care of other people, but recognizing that leaning into your social support network is equally important for you. The temptation sometimes is to disinvest at the moments that you need to invest in others the most. And what I find so fascinating about this research, and it's actually research in Adam Grant's book, Give and Take, which I'm sure many of you have read, is that individuals who provide social support to others are 40% more likely to receive support in return. We've always thought, okay, do I feel supported? Am I supported in my environment? Is my company supporting me? Are my coworkers supporting me? How much do I have? Turns out that's not the right question. The real question is, how much are you providing to other people? Because it will come back in spades to you, right? It is important to feel supported. But if you have the bandwidth to be able to provide social support to others, this is how we create the breadth and depth and meaning and community. And we do so by investing in one another. So my litmus test for the pandemic has been very simple for this place. When I'm asking people, hey, how's it going? If they say great or good, I'm like, awesome, fantastic. If they say okay or not great, my rule is to follow up with one extra question, and that is, oh, tell me what's going on. It's so simple, and yet in that moment, it provides that opportunity for that individual who's now flagged for me that they might have something going on, and they may or may not share it with me, but it is so important to ask that extra question. We've always kept distance between professional and personal lives. That is gone. We are now in each other's homes. We see each other's bookshelves. We see each other's pets. We've talked all hours of the day, right? So if we don't take those moments when the opportunity presents it to us, then we've missed a key opportunity to provide social support and receive it in return. So one of my favorite quotes by Brené Brown is to write a new ending for yourself, for the people that you're meant to serve and support, and for your culture. And I can think of no greater quote for closing out here today with Matrix and this community. I want to know, what will you do to shape the future of happiness? How will you bring fearless positivity into your life by rethinking some of your stress, by optimizing your mindset, using this positive habit you just committed to, or by activating your social support, by providing social support to others in a deeper way? These are the building blocks, and I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to get to speak to you today and just say thank you for all the incredible work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
So if you would like, we have another 12 minutes scheduled with Amy where she can take some questions or receive some of your comments.
That's easy. Wonderful. So yeah, I think I spoke faster than I meant to. So I now have the opportunity to field any questions. And I actually love Q&A because it's the opportunity to really get to hear what's on your minds and the questions that you have. So are there any questions out there? It looks like maybe you have a question. Yeah.
Hey, great talk. Thank you. My name is Alfred Atanda. I'm coming from Wilmington, Delaware. I had a question about the screen limits and screen time. So do you see a differentiation between things like you say to your husbands on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and getting caught up in political debates and controversial topics versus, like, my personal vice is Seinfeld, for any Seinfeld fans. After a long day at work in the operating room, I come home and just watch a couple episodes just for a few chuckles. Are you talking about those sorts of things, or are you talking more about what you were saying that your husband gets into and such?
A couple of years ago, I would have said, and that's a great question, thank you. A couple of years ago, I would have said, oh, it's really about the entertainment screen time. But because of how blended our lives are and the fact that we're constantly juggling and multitasking. So during work, you may be getting personal text messages. You might be shopping on Amazon. I won't tell anybody. You might be, trying to coordinate with the plumber in the background. And so there's so much going on that the amalgamation has been that this average amount of screen time has now doubled in the last 2 years from 6.5 hours to 13 hours per day. And the amount of screen time that a person can handle actually differs depending on the other things that you're doing outside of screen time. So one of the individuals that I worked with at Google, I had been testing out a new survey tool that we were working on where it assessed whether or not somebody was essentially digitally well at that point. And I was certain this guy was going to fail epically because he was the tech help desk guy. He worked 12 hours a day at Google with computers and everybody's technical problems. He's on screens constantly. And it turned out he had one of the highest scores I've ever seen in terms of his digital health. And when I went to ask him about what he was doing, he said, oh, well, I know I'm on screens a lot, so I actually choose to bike 5 miles to work in the morning. Of course, I have to bike home as well. And I take a solid hour-long lunch break where I don't have any screens around, and I make sure to set up lunch dates with some of my colleagues. So he had social support, he had time away, he had exercise built in, and so he could handle it. But my mom, on the other hand, gets about 30 minutes on a computer, and then she gets so exasperated that it feels overwhelming to her. So her limit is 30 minutes versus 12 hours. Now, you have to figure out for you, where is that point? And I think that it's still a little bit squishy at this point, but I think that moment where you begin to feel the irritation underneath your skin, where you feel like, I have to check this device. I can't get away from it. I feel like I've been on screens all day. That's a pretty good indicator, right? Like, I think having that downtime, if you need some respite, some entertainment, you're switching it up, that's great. It's restorative. The moment where you've been binging for 6 hours and you feel like you can't get up off the couch, well, that's a different situation, right? So all about balance, but it starts with self-awareness and recognizing what other habits do I have? How long am I spending? And does that align with my values? Because there really is an opportunity cost between the amount of time that we are spending online versus offline, right? It is literally a zero-sum game. So one of the other conversations that my husband and I have had is that I like to read myself to sleep at night, which seems benign, right? Like reading sounds great, but he said, even though reading is awesome, what your cost is that you're not having time with me. You're not connecting with me. So maybe 10 minutes of reading and maybe 20 minutes of hanging out with me, and then you get both. And I thought, oh, that's a really simple mechanism. Just thinking about what opportunity costs, am I okay with it? Does it fit with my values and who I want to be?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question. Other questions? Anybody else?
Well, I'll ask a question.
Okay.
For folks who think a lot about money, what can you say about how this affects costs in a business or a healthcare practice?
Great question. So I have a fantastic answer for that one, because we had an opportunity to work with Ochsner Health Systems. This is pre-pandemic. And Ochsner Health Systems at that point was going through this rebrand, because for a long time they had this operating policy that they didn't want the hospital to seem too happy, because people were sick and dying. And they were like, we should just kind of keep it muted. And as they did so, they were losing doctors, they were losing patients, they were losing money, people were staying in the hospital longer. And so somebody had the bright idea, like maybe we should change the way we operate. And we're gonna recreate Ochsner Health Systems as a luxury hospital system. And we're gonna make it so when you go, it feels like you're going to the Ritz-Carlton. And so they were like, fantastic. So they actually went to the Ritz-Carlton to learn from them about customer satisfaction. And so after paying a whole lot of money to do that, they learned that there is something, and I'll give it to you here for free. It's called the 10-5 way. And it turns out that they had a simple strategy, which was that if anybody in the hospital came within 10 feet of you, you're supposed to smile. And if they come within 5 feet of you, you say hello. I just saved you guys about $500,000. So they went back, they implemented this at Ochsner Health Systems, and it turns out that after only training the staff and measuring this at the end of 1 year, they found that individuals who had that the individuals who were coming to stay at the hospital were reporting that they were there for 1.4 days less, that patient satisfaction levels had gone up, that doctor satisfaction levels and provider satisfaction had gone up for the first time in a decade. They found that the individuals began referring the hospital to other friends about twice as often. And at the end of the day, they had a 0.1% bump in the revenue for the year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for a billion-dollar organization, was pretty massive. So when you talk about the value of $1 million smile, there it is, right? So some of these things sound squishy. They sound, oh, it sounds so nice, but to take time away or to train my staff and just breathing for a minute, that just doesn't compute. Turns out it does, and it does so in a massive way. Also helps out with recruiting at this point. We know in the Great Resignation that a lot of places are, a lot of individuals are optimizing going to companies that value their health and wellness in a very real way, and not just providing lip service, but actually showing how they're doing this. And so for those organizations who are able to demonstrate that they are putting real intention behind that, they're better able to recruit. Awesome, thank you.
Thank you so much for this. This has been incredibly helpful. So my question is, I can definitely see how you can turn the Lego into a positive. The kids are playing, If there's a bigger issue, obviously there's a million different situations, but how do you turn that negative, that stressor, into something that's a positive that you can act on instead of just stressing you out?
So I love that question, and thank you for asking it. And I think that it begins with, number one, setting intention, that's something that you want to do, because the bigger, more negative things in life, of course, they feel overwhelming at first, and sometimes it takes a long time to create a different narrative. For me, it was about 10 years to get to the place where I was in that growth zone from Hurricane Katrina. Definitely not the first 2 years. But as we go through life, we're recasting, we're rethinking our scenarios. And when we go back to what Sonia Lyubomirsky said about how only 10% of our happiness is due to the external environment, it's really owning, number one, that I can choose how I see this, that there's multiple different realities here, and I'm choosing one certain one, but is it the most helpful one to me? I think that's step number one. And then step number two is a daily practice. I think sometimes we want a light bulb to go off and it's just gonna suddenly, we won't feel the same way anymore. But I'm thinking of my goddaughter who had a giant mole replaced on her knee when she was about or taken out of her knee when she was 4 years old. And so she couldn't walk for like 6 months. And she fell into a bit of a depression. But her parents were savvy enough to start her on writing down gratitudes. And every day, on a sheet of paper, they wrote down the gratitudes on the same sheet of paper for 6 months. And it became a part of her story. But the age of 5, she could talk about the value of gratitude and how it helped her get through her knee surgery. So even from an early age, it is something that we can instill in a mindset that this is something that we work towards. And it may not happen in 21 days. It might take 6 months to get there, but it certainly is something that we can continue to work towards with social support. It takes other people around you because we all fall off the wagon. So those are the people who help us to stay the course.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, Robert.
See, I told you, the MATRC brings the best of the best. Thank you again, Amy. So for those of you online, realize that you will have a chance to engage virtually with Amy for some follow-up discussion. Please look and work with Eric on the virtually integrated session. And for the rest of us here in person, we have about an hour now to visit the exhibit hall and network with each other. So we encourage you to do that, please. And we look forward to seeing you at one of your 3 tracks at 11:15. Please look at the event Mobi for locations, because some of those locations may have changed from what was printed, but we'll see you all soon. Have a great hour.